Welcome back to our weekly podcast, Yankee Doodle Goes to the Polls, where we have red, we got blue, what you want. I am your co-host, Elise Paul, and this is my co-host,
Ruby Beckendorf,
and we will be representing the Democratic Party. Today we are joined with Maisy White and Cooper Meacham, who are a part of the Republican Party, and we have a very special guest, Erica Conchas, who is from the 1820 Super PAC.
Okay, so Maisy and Cooper, could you please tell us some of Colin's reform plans?
So Collins is working to improve education and the affordability for education. She's also working towards tax relief, and she's also working on finding access for healthcare, specifically for rural areas, and she's also attempting to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
All right, and Cooper, do you have anything to add to that?
She also has a COVID action plan that we will talk about later.
Wonderful. Okay, and now Elise and I will fill you in on some of Gideon's policies.
Gideon has a policy for the Affordable Care Act, Medicare, and lowering health care costs for Americans.
Yeah. All right, so Erica, can you please tell us who you decided to fund for your Super PAC and why you chose to support them?
I decided to fund the Republican Party, who is led by Susan Collins, and our PAC is called the 1820 Super PAC, and we decided to fund Collins' campaign because she already has an amount of supporters behind her, and we would spend less money funding her because of that.
All right, so just getting right into it, do you guys think that the ranked choice voting system in Maine will interfere with who wins? And if so, do you believe it proves to be more beneficial or detrimental?
So can you define what ranked choice voting means?
Sure. If no candidate is the first choice of more than half of the voters, then all votes cast for the candidate with the lowest number of first choices are redistributed to the remaining candidates based on who is ranked next to each ballot.
All right, so Erica, do you have something to say about that?
So I'll answer that by saying that I believe that the ranked choice voting system will not interfere with who wins, mostly because Maine is a predominantly Democratic state, which would prove more beneficial towards the Democratic Party, but more detrimental towards the Republican Party, as we do want the win in the House.
So that leads into our next question. Maisy and Cooper, since Republicans face greater partisan risk in this election, how important is it that Collins is elected?
Well, we've seen over the past few years with Republicans in control of the Senate and the House, it's been running fairly smoothly. So I would say that it's fairly important that Collins is elected again so that we can maintain power and continue the smooth running.
Yeah, which both parties obviously want, but... All right.
And along with that, if Joe Biden is elected and Donald Trump is out of the White House, it is even more important for Republicans to win the Senate.
That is very true. And you make a great point, because even with the potential win of Joe Biden, having a majority of the Senate being Republican, it makes his job significantly harder. With all that I just said, we still believe that the Republicans will eventually win the Senate again, but even still, because Gideon's and Collins' policies are so close, as Collins has literally described herself as a liberal Republican, I don't think that it's going to be that much of a difference between who wins, because her policies are so much more like left-leaning. So even if it is a win for the Republicans in Maine, we'll still get some of our representation in there. So bouncing off of what I just said, so Cooper and Maisy, since she is a self-described liberal Republican, do you agree with her views, or do you think they're not right-leaning enough?
So I personally do agree with her more liberal views, as a lot of the senators who endorse her are more on the Democratic side. It's showing a lot of support towards the actions that she wants, especially like the changes she wants in fixing the division of bipartisan ways and trying to close the gap between the parties.
All right. And Cooper, what do you think?
I also agree with her policies, but I feel like her Senate seat would lean more to the Republican side because she is basically only a Republican in name. And basically her policies deter many Republicans as they want a more conservative Republican and not a more liberal Republican.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's interesting that Cooper made that point that Republicans are looking for more of a conservative candidate because Collins voted no on prohibiting minors to cross state line borders for abortion, which also raises questions because she supports Brett Kavanaugh, who is anti-abortion.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's kind of interesting that she didn't go for something so left-leaning when she literally tried to confirm Brett Kavanaugh, who's an accused rapist and someone who does not believe in the reproductive rights of women. So it's kind of, she's flip-flopping, so I don't know who they would get behind when supporting her.
Bouncing off of Ruby's point about Kavanaugh, we do believe, honestly, that this race would be an easy win for Collins if she hadn't said what she said about Kavanaugh or had supported him, but we think it really skewed people's views towards her and towards Gideon, who hasn't had a scandal like this yet, and so that's why we don't think it will be such an easy win for her, and why we believe that Gideon should hold the seat in Senate as of right now.
Elise, that's actually interesting that you say that Gideon hasn't had a scandal yet because Gideon accepted the money from the Be a Hero Fund, which promised $3.7 million, which was 2 years in the making to raise that money. They promised that money to whoever was to challenge Senator Collins if Collins did confirm Justice Kavanaugh. Now, don't you think that that is an attack towards Senator Collins from Gideon by accepting that money?
I don't think so at all. I think that's just standing up for her beliefs, and if she didn't attack Collins for that, she would be even in more trouble by her supporters. Her supporters support her because of her views on reproductive right and women's rights, and if she were to just sit back and do nothing while she tried to confirm a rapist and just a misogynist, she would get more shit for it.
If Gideon didn't take the money and promote her campaign through it, then it would just be such an easy win for Collins because she already has her reputation built. She's been in the Senate before, and Gideon is a new-time comer, so we think it will be, we think it's important that she has this awareness towards her campaign. So, Erica, we want to give you some time to inform us a little more and also inform the audience a little more on what your PAC is, what it's supporting, and what it really means in general. So if you want to elaborate.
Well, to give a little bit of background, our PAC is called the 1820 Pact, which is the year that Maine was founded. And we are basically supporting Senator Collins for her re-election because she has the people of Maine's trust. She's been a senator before, and she's represented Maine previously. November 2nd, the polls shows that Gideon has 54% of the polls in her favor, but Collins has 46%. But with the mail-in votes, we believe that the number will raise because of how much support she has received in the past, and we are confident that Collins will take this election.
Okay, so I actually have a question for the Democratic Party. So do you guys think that the divide between Republicans and Democrats are too strong for any agreements to be met?
I mean, yeah, that is like a huge part as to why each party wants to win the Senate, because they know they'll have total control. And I honestly feel that because of like the divide in the parties is so strong, it is hard for agreements to be met because people only use confirmation bias, so they're just confirming what they already know. They don't want to listen to new information. They're stuck in their ways and they're stuck in their parties. But I think if people were to really listen and actually like hear new information, think people would be more open to like maybe more policies or reforms that other parties have, regardless of which party they belong to.
I think it will also be interesting because me and my co-host, as of now, we're predicting that the state of Maine will go blue, but with the current polls and watching the percentages, as much as we want the win for our Democratic Party, we do see the polls favoring Collins as of right now. So it will be interesting if our state does go blue, but our senator is a Republican.
Yeah, and like we said before, because the difference in Gideon and Collins is like so little, they both have very left-leaning views. I don't think that question really applies so much to us as the rest of the Senate majority.
Yeah, but of course we do want our state to go blue, and we also want our seat in Senate to be blue as well, because ultimately we want the control of the Senate to be favoring the Democratic Party.
Exactly.
I also would like to point out the fact that Sara Gideon wasn't actually born in Maine, so to the Republican eye, it might seem like she doesn't have the best interests at heart for all of the people in Maine.
I mean, but by that standards, Collins's supporters, like 95% of her funding is from out of state, so it's not like she's really like only orienting her money on like her hometown, you know what I mean?
Well, to bounce off of that, having 95% of supporters being outside state just proves how confident people are in Collins' efforts.
Yeah, that's true.
So, Cooper and Maisy, do you guys agree with Collins' announcements that she would not be supporting or voting for Donald Trump?
So I do agree with Collins' opposition to voting for Donald Trump because of Trump's multiple racist and sexist actions that he has done, and also, once again, how we're trying to close the gap between the parties. And as we've seen that Trump has made a clear division between the nation, between Democrats and Republicans, and also his lack of effort with the coronavirus and just how he handled that whole case. But I also don't think that Gideon would have handled it any better. I actually have a quote from Kevin Kelly on Gideon's plan for COVID. The quote says, "Sara Gideon wants the government to run healthcare, and she wants to pay for it by raising your taxes. Many rural hospitals are already struggling to even stay open, and Gideon's plan would only increase the tremendous pressure on these hospitals, putting patient care at risk."
Well, I would have to disagree with that, because even if she wants to raise your taxes, it would only be the people who make a significant amount of money, and considering how most are in rural areas, they're not really making that high income.
Yeah, and it says here that a part of her plan is to actually reduce the healthcare costs and expand the coverage.
Yeah, so her COVID action plan would actually be beneficial, and while hospitals may be more populated, I'm sure they would do it in a safe way, and it's actually safer to get all these people the treatment they need so they don't spread more. So in the long run, I don't think it would be that detrimental to anyone's health.
Bouncing off of that, I also think that Collins has a more specific plan, as her healthcare goals are specifically focused on fixing healthcare in rural areas.
All right, Cooper, do you have anything else on Collins' COVID plan that could be beneficial?
So Susan Collins' COVID plan, it has a lot of stuff that has to do with helping American families, supporting patients, and since COVID has taken a lot of our jobs away and has led to a lot of unemployment, she has a plan called the CARES Act, which will which has $377 billion for small business economic relief.
All right, guys, thank you so much for listening with us this week. We're going to check back in a little bit later this week to see if our predictions were correct and to see who's in the lead or who has won, and also maybe discuss a little bit about the presidential election as well.
All right, thank you guys for joining us.
Bye! Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Yankee Doodle Goes to the Polls, where we got red, we got blue, what you want. As always, I am your co-host, Elise Paul, and I am here joined again with my co-host,
Ruby Beckendorf.
And once again, we are joined with Cooper Meacham, Maisy White, and Erica Conchas.
This week we will be discussing the results of our Senate race and even a little bit of the presidential race and how the states are going blue and red and what that means for all of us.
Yes, and we'll also be talking about how important it is that Maine is blue or red and what that means for the Senate control. So, Erica, the votes are in and they have been counted. Can you walk us through how the the current polls related to your predictions?
Yeah, so as of November 5th, the New York Times has updated us saying that Gideon is currently behind in the polls at 42.9%, and Collins is leading the polls at 50.4%, which has proven not only myself, but the Republicans' party prediction correctly, as we said that Collins would be leading and would be taking this race.
That's great. I'm sure you're really glad that you decided to fund Collins instead of Gideon.
Very true.
Yes, ma'am.
Democrats are a little disappointed, but hey, it's okay. She is still very liberal-leaning, as we said a lot last week. So it's not that much of a heartbreaking loss, but still would have liked that Senate control. Speaking of which, the current Senate race hasn't been decided yet, but it's currently leading 48 Republicans and 46 Democrats. So it is a close race as compared to October of 2020, where it was Republicans had a 53 to 45 majority. So we're just hoping that we get those two other ones, and then we'll be home safe.
Now we will be discussing what our Democratic prediction was, and we were actually correct. We thought that our state of Maine was going to end up blue, and that Gideon would actually be elected, and that turned out to be the case.
Okay. So as I am part of the Republican Party, we are very satisfied with the outcome, and we're very excited to see what Susan will do for the Senate and what changes will be made.
Yes, I'm sure that that win was very important because it is such a close race right now that even one Senate seat goes to a Republican, it could change this the balance drastically.
Of course.
Okay. Yeah. So, Erica, how did the 1820 pack feel about this victory?
Well, the 1820 pack is obviously very content with how things are going, considering that the 1820 pack just this year has reported donating over $775,000 in contributions towards Collins' campaign. Her campaign did raise over $2.4 million, but we did contribute the $775,000. And we're very happy with how the money was spent, again, considering the outcome of this race and how it's going. And we just support her policies, and we're very happy with how the future is going to look.
Well, I know my party was surprised by the outcome of Susan Collins winning the Senate seat because, as the polls were showing before, Sara Gideon had a lead over us. But the fact that we won just shows that Susan Collins' support in Maine is really important and has a big effect on her campaign. And since Maine is a Democratic state, the fact that she was also voted in the Senate, despite being a Republican, shows how great of a person she is.
Very true.
Yes, and I think it also proves that she does have a very liberal way of thinking and will cater towards both the Republican parties as well as the Democratic parties, and that she's the perfect mix between the two, and how even despite her scandal that happened earlier this year, Maine still saw past that and wanted to elect someone that they were a little more familiar with rather than someone who was new, who had newer policies that they didn't know too much about yet.
Exactly, and I know that the Democratic Party is pretty pleased because their views were so similar, and because Maine population is mostly a blue state, we know that obviously her policies were enough to sway other people's.
I just think that was shown also in the presidential election, how Maine went fully blue, but the Republican candidate for the Senate still won, just showing how liberal her thought process was.
Very good point.
So I know that we aren't completely sure about who's controlling the Senate yet, and we might not even know until January, and then we also don't know who's going to win the election as of today, November 6th. And I just wanted to ask to anyone, what do you think will happen in the long run? Because Joe Biden is leading, but the Republican Party is winning in Senate. How do you think there could be some controversy or friction between the House and the president if it's Republican versus a Democratic president.
Well, yeah, as Maisy was saying in our last episode about trying to close the gap, I think it's a very, like, wishful thinking kind of thing, because even with a fully Republican Senate, Joe Biden is not going to get very far, no matter how bad we want him to. It's just they're going to always vote against him because they can't see past the gap in the parties. They're not going to be listening to his policies. They're going to be just trying to favor themselves more and push themselves further. So I think it's going to be extremely difficult if the Republicans end up taking the majority of the Senate chairs. Their seats, but still.
Yeah.
As we've previously talked about how the Republican Party is currently carrying the lead in the Senate, and how Susan Collins is winning the Republican vote for the Senate, but is a more liberal person. I wanted to talk about how her policies compare to other Democratic winners and Republican winners who are taking the seats in Senate that we've seen. And I know a couple of us did some research on the other senators, so if you guys want to talk about how their policies compare to hers.
So just looking at other random Republican states in the Senate race, we can see that Collins is obviously very liberal. Just looking at South Carolina, for example, the Republican winner for that state is against abortion rights, which is the opposite of what Collins believes, showing her true liberal standpoint on abortion.
Yeah.
Right. And branching off of what Maisy said about Collins not being so much conservative but more liberal, I'd like to compare her values for education to the values of Tommy Tuberville, who won the seat in Alabama for the Republican Party. He values the teaching of God in the education system, which Collins isn't for, so that shows the differences between them, even though they are both Republican, but one is more liberal.
And I looked into a Democratic senator who won the election in Michigan, which is another state that has a lot of rural land, so I thought that they would kind of have the same policies in trying to improve their state and their land. So basically, some of his policies are protecting the Great Lakes and fighting for clean drinking water, improving healthcare and prescription drug prices, and things that are like strengthening agriculture and rural communities, which actually directly relate to a lot of the policies that Collins had. So I do think that her getting a seat and being a Republican senator is something that we shouldn't look at as, like, for Democrats a bad thing, because I think she represents both of the parties and will outweigh some of the Republican voices.
Exactly. How it wasn't exactly a win for us, because obviously Gideon didn't win, but it also still very much was a win for us because of all of Collins' ideals. Like you just said, like her environmental ideas, her educational ideals, like it's pretty much a win for us too. So no one's really offended over here.
And also adding on to that, I understand that it's not a full win for the Democratic Party, but I think that this will definitely change the image for Republicans in democracy, as this will hopefully help people see us as much more open-minded and liberal than they make us out to be.
Yeah, I agree with you a lot, because as we've been talking about how this past election and this current election, we've seen a great divide in America, and I think a lot of people are trying to get that back. And I really do think that she was a perfect candidate for us to kind of start rekindling the relationship between the Democrat Party and the Republican Party, because we have been so divided, and she kind of gives us both sides of the parties, and I think that's something that will be greatly appreciated in the future, and something that a lot of the other senators can keep in mind and kind of look up to her as a role model for how the future of senators should go.
Of course. And because also, as we see in the presidential election, there is still a very clear divide. But even if we're starting with just the rekindling of just the small Senate in Maine, that's a start to
a broader democracy.
Yes. Exactly. All right, thank you guys for joining us again this week. It's been great talking with you all and hearing your opinions. If you have any last things to say, now would be the time.
I do not.
All right. Great. I think then that's a wrap. We just wanted to say that today's November 6th, and we still don't know the final outcome of the presidential election. We also don't know the final outcome of the Senate race and who's going to take full control yet. But we just wanted to say that we're very happy with the outcome in Maine, and that this was a great conversation, and that we loved hearing everyone's point of view. So thank you so much for talking to us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye, and join us next time on Yankee
Yankee
Doodle
Doodle goes to the polls.